Welcome to the Cash Flow Project Podcast. Are you looking to better your financial situation by increasing your cash flow? Too busy to hunt for real estate deals or don't know where to start? Then you're in the right spot. Join us as we dive in and talk about investing for cash flow using multifamily real estate.
All right. Aloha, everyone. Welcome to the Cash Flow Project Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Fierros, with Tri-City Equity Group. With me is my co-host, Vince Gathings. Today, we've got on the show Anthony Vicino. Anthony is a serial entrepreneur who has helped build multiple multi-million-dollar companies from the ground up by creating efficient systems at scale, utilizing value-based content marketing strategies, and always focusing on providing exceptional end-user experiences. Additionally, he's a best-selling author, which is pretty freaking awesome. He's an investor and obviously a small business owner who successfully managed his own personal portfolio, both multifamily assets spread at different parts across the country. And then he also joined forces with a partner to create Invictus Capital, which I know he'll tell us a little bit more about here on the show. So together, Anthony and his partner, Dan, are driven to help people achieve financial security by providing solid multifamily-based investment opportunities in an environment of trust, transparency, and clarity. I like that. That's pretty cool. Anthony, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. It's good to be here.
We're excited to have you on. Hopefully we can bring you a little bit of warmth and aloha. I know you're up in Minnesota.
I know, I need it.
What's the weather like for you in the middle of winter time?
Yeah, we're floating right at like 12 degrees today, deep snow up to the knees.
Nice.
I mean, have you guys seen snow ever? Do you guys ever see it in Hawaii? Like maybe up on the mountaintops or not at all?
Not on this
mountaintop. Not on Oahu. Yeah, we're based out of Oahu. So
yeah, I just went to Michigan for 2 weeks to visit some family, and I'm sitting there packing. I'm like, I literally have one pair of Levi's and one pair of shoes that like I had to go there, go buy sweaters, go buy, boots and things like that. Mm-hmm. For a 2 week trip. It was kind of funny.
I was bundled up even just going down to El Paso to go look at a property we've got under contract. And, here I am looking at the temperatures and it's like, oh man, it's going to be 30 degrees. Like it's going to be freezing. I got my beanie. I got my, my thermal,
Yeah.
Didn't need any of that. It's like still super comfortable. So, But anyways, we'll send you some sunshine. It's a nice, beautiful 78 degrees here is kind of normal.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, guys. It's funny. I used to live in the Bay Area, right? I moved out there to pursue professional rock climbing for a number of years, and it was great while I was there. But then I eventually moved away because the weather was always really good, like 68 degrees and sunny, and you start to lose track of time because you don't have the seasons, right? Mm-hmm. And so then I was like, exactly. Oh, maybe I'll move. I'm ready to move back to Minnesota. And now, like dead of winter, I'm like, what was I thinking?
No, that's actually what I was thinking when I was there. I was like, gosh, I do miss the seasons. I miss that cold, crisp air. You do come to appreciate that. So it's like, well, our vacations now are winter vacations. We go to winter locations. So, but always nice to come back to Hawaii.
Yeah.
But well, enough about the weather. We definitely want to get into. We know you got a lot to offer, a lot to share with the audience. So I want to make sure we give you the time and attention that we'd love to. So. For those, of our listeners who aren't familiar with you, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got started in your journey in real estate.
Yeah. So my journey, I guess we got to go way, way back to when I was like just getting out of college. And it was really clear to me at that point that I was never going to be very good in the corporate world or working for other people because I'm just like a really bad employee. I'm really lazy generally. So there's a great Bill Gates quote that says something along the lines of I'd rather hire a lazy A player than a hardworking B player because the lazy A player, they figure out how to get the job done in less time. And that was kind of me. Like I would come into work and I would get the job done. I'd figure out all the best ways to get the system like it done so that I could just coast the rest of the time. But that created like a lot of internal dissonance for me because I'm the type of person who likes to be pushing and growing and challenging myself. So like the idea of just going and phoning it in for the next 40 years or 50 years and then retiring, like it just was never going to work out. So I knew from an early age, like I had to go and figure out my own thing. So that kind of led me down a lot of different paths. One of which was, I went and became a professional athlete for a number of years. And then I started writing science fiction and fantasy novels, and that was great. And then I started building businesses because that was starting to tickle a couple of itches that I have, which is just building things and seeing them grow. And so I started a high-rise window washing company and then a manufacturing company here in the Twin Cities. And then that eventually got me into real estate. And real estate's been like at this crossroads of my life at a number of points. But when I was younger, I didn't really recognize it for what it was, which was like this really awesome opportunity. So my first experience was just fix and flips in college. Like my roommate and his dad, we were, going and fixing and flipping houses. We were living in them while we were doing that. So it was like house hacking before I ever even knew what that was. And all I learned out of that was I hate construction. Like I absolutely cannot participate in anything that requires me to build something physically with my hands. And so I pretty much gave up on that right away after we did about 2 of those. And then it wasn't for another 10 years until I was living in the Bay Area. A friend comes to me and says, "Hey, I'm buying these quads. Do you want to do that?" And I was like, "Sure, I'll give you some money." And he went and did it. And we still have those assets. It's generating passive cash flow for me, and it's great. But it was never like this career or this like life-changing thing for me until I was living back in Minnesota a number of years ago. And the way I tell the story is I was driving downtown Minneapolis, looking up at the skyline one day, and the skyline was just like looking extra magnificent. And I was struck with the question as I looked at the skyscrapers of like, hey, who owns a skyscraper? Like, what does it take to buy a skyscraper? And I have like zero interest in buying a skyscraper, just to be very clear. But like trying to answer that question led me down the rabbit hole that eventually led me to discovering multifamily and just how powerful of a vehicle that is. And so I started looking deeper into that, started educating myself, decided let's start small, go buy a triplex, and then kind of scale up from there. I wanted to learn how to operate this little business. I wanted to learn how to deal with the tenants, deal with the city, and just operate this small little business profitably. Once I did that and felt confident, we just started scaling, started going larger and larger and larger. And then that eventually led me to partnering with my now partner, Dan Kruger. And we formed Invictus Capital at the end of 2019 so that we could start syndicating. Before that, we were just doing everything as joint ventures. So we syndicated our first deal at the beginning of 2020. We just closed our second syndication at the end of 2020. And now we're just moving forward, kind of using a blend of both joint ventures and syndications.
That's awesome. Well, you covered a lot of ground there. So, I know that you're an author. Can you, and I know you've got kind of a creative background and whatnot. How has that lent into kind of what you're doing on the real estate side? Because you've got a lot of different pieces here. You mentioned, hey, you're a professional athlete. You're an author. You've had your hand in multiple businesses here. I'm just that's the one that kind of stuck out to me. Mm-hmm. So can you, tell us a little bit more about that and kind of how that plays into what you're doing now? I mean, you've got so much stuff going on. I'm actually pretty impressed.
Yeah, the books are interesting because there's not like a really obvious intersection between that and like building a business until you start kind of peeling back the layers and maybe looking at it a bit more abstractly. So like at my core, I think of myself as a storyteller, both now as like a real estate, business person, but then also as a author. And the reason I look at things through that lens is that regardless of what you're doing, whether that's trying to sell a piece of real estate or buy a piece of real estate or working with an investor, trying to convince them or show them that this is a good opportunity, it's all about the story that you're telling. And if you can get people to buy into that story, and if you can't get anybody to buy into your story, then nobody's ever going to sell you a piece of real estate. Nobody's ever going to buy it from you, and nobody's ever going to invest with you. And so at its core, I tell stories. And so right now with real estate and the intersection with the storytelling, well, it's really powerful because a lot of people, they don't see how their story intersects with investing. They think it's this really inaccessible thing. It's for rich people, or it requires a lot of their time and activity, like dealing with toilets, tenants, and trash. And they just don't see that their story that could actually fit in that world, that there's an avenue for that. And so that's something that we're really passionate about right now, is how do we get that story out to people so that they realize, hey, this is something that you could do, and it's way better than you think it is, and it's way easier than you think also.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I read I read Oren Klopp's book last year, and the whole story's premise is the different layers of the brain and all that stuff, and he's like, if you can't get past the croc brain of just the basic story of just building trust and things like that, then it doesn't matter how cool your spreadsheets are, how great your infographics are and your numbers and returns. Like, you already lost them because you didn't tell an effective story, and you kind of scared them, and the scared mind says no. So absolutely, definitely can relate after reading that book of it. Just not dumb it down, but simplify everything to like, how is this going to help them in the easiest way possible, this investment. So
Yeah, that book, that's Pitch Anything, right? Like that book is fantastic. Because a lot of people struggle, especially real estate investors. If you're listening to this and you're trying to figure out how to work with brokers, or you're trying to work with investors, and you're finding that your story is not really getting through, it's because you're coming at it probably from the wrong angle, and you're trying to argue from facts and numbers, and trying to show like, hey, this is a really good logical investment. And people don't start from logic. They start from emotion. And so that book can be a really powerful way to help you like circumnavigate that, learn, like, how do you come at it from the emotion side first?
No, I really like that too. Like there's something, and I have a ministry background. So part of that is one of the phrases that we would kind of use internally is just like, well, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And, the storytelling piece of that is, hey, you know what? No, it's actually kind of cutting through like that, the facts. Like, I don't care about your facts necessarily, right? If they're not trying to solve my problem, then it doesn't mean anything. And so, they have to have an understanding that, no, you actually care about my plight. My plight may, your plight may be, you know what? I don't know about the financial future for my family, right? I don't know how to get started this in real estate investing. I don't know how this piece of this puzzle can fit into my problem, right? So, but if you can come at it from that, the standpoint of like, no, I understand, kind of having that empathetic piece. And then, you're talking about it. It's like, okay, then I need to weave this into a story that's palatable so that you can receive it. So yeah, no, I think that's huge. So I know you're working on some different books and you got some new projects coming on. Like I said, I think that's super fascinating. I've heard some part of it too is like some of it's fiction and kind of coming from a totally different angle. Is that correct?
Yeah, my writing career, I would say the first 12 novels 12 books that I published were novels. So they were science fiction and fantasy, and it's all about, understanding and putting yourself in the position of the characters that you're writing to try and tell a story that's going to evoke some kind of emotion from the reader. Because if the book isn't evocative in some way, then why is somebody incentivized to keep reading it? And it's the same thing with what I do now in a lot of ways, like in my business of thinking about marketing, our services, and like trying to, reach our target audience. It's about, okay, what is it that they are trying to get out of this? What's the emotional response that they're having right now when they're hearing this particular sentence, right? And so I would say the fiction was all about the empathy. And now it's about, okay, applying that empathy to drive a behavior, which is saying, hey, I know that this service, like real estate, let's say, can be a really powerful investment vehicle for the right person. So let's find that person and get this message through to them so that they can see it and that they can then take action and give them an avenue to take that action. And so right now I've pivoted away from writing fiction, and now I'm more interested in writing around actually education on real estate and then around mindset and habit formation. And so that's what I'm more passionate about now, is like, how do we take these emotions and use them to drive a behavior?
Got it. And I'm gonna jump in real quick. During my research and also known as cyber stalking, I found your website about your hyper focus, and I read it with Steve. Your superpower on there, which I'm going to kind of spoiler alert for Fire Round. But that while I was reading, I was like, oh my God, this is exactly what I have. So I've been trying to explain, in there what the hyper focus is and how my ADHD and everything like that has been like the first half of my life has been like severely, impacting negatively. And then at some point in like my mid 20s, I kind of like a light bulb hit and I flipped the switch. And then it's been like ever since like 24, now I'm 32, has just been like a rocket ship. Cause I figured out how to like, control it or something like that. So I want to hear that story.
Yeah. So it's amazing. Like, I think a lot of people from our generation, they hear ADHD and they don't really fully understand it. It was a very overly diagnosed thing. So a lot of people kind of discredit it. And a lot of people think that attention deficit hyperactivity disorder means that we lack the ability to focus. And that's not the case. It's just that we don't always have the ability to control where we're focusing. And so I might right now get really focused on my water bottle. And if I go into what's called a hyper-focused state, I could spend hours just focusing on this, like studying it for whatever reason. Like if that's the paint drying, great. And so what you need to do then is create, habits and structures and routines around your life, or at least this is what's worked for me, is, to create those structures so that when I do get focused on something, it's on something that's going to move me forward. Because, everybody's seeking that flow state. And we're actually really blessed with, having this disorder, because we can go in and out of it really quickly. And it's a really powerful state called the hyper-focused state. But a lot of people, when they're young, they don't know how to control it. They don't know how to harness that energy and put it towards something productive or creative. And so they end up, they watch too much TV or they play too many video games. And I did all those things. Like it's a really easy spiral to get into, because we're very easily addicted to things because of this hyper-focused trait. But if you can figure out how to flip that script and turn this from like your biggest weakness to now your biggest strength, it can be both simultaneously, but it can be so much more powerful as a strength than it ever was as a weakness. And it gives you this competitive advantage over other people, because they just don't have the ability to stay as engaged with a thing for as long as you do. And that's really what, success comes down to in life, is applying consistent focus over a long enough time period. And whoever can do that, they're going to get the furthest ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I used to tell people, my analogy was like growing up, imagine like having you're sitting in front of a TV and the channel changes like every 2 seconds and you have no control over it. And you're trying to watch the show, but every 2 seconds, the channel's changing on you. He's like, that's what it was like for me growing up and thinking and like trying to, stay on one topic. It was like the channel's constantly getting changed on me and I couldn't control it. And again, like at some point, like my 20s, I don't know what happened, but like I, figured it out. And then I was like 24. I remember like that one year I read like 150 books on just investing and everything like that, investing mindset, personal growth. And ever since then, it's just been like off to the races. So it's pretty awesome that you created a resource for other people like that have those similar things and helping them get the resources they need and hit that hyper-focused state or flow state is pretty awesome. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, it's always so cool to find other people who have like a similar story and a similar experience, because I think a lot of times, especially regardless of what you're struggling with, you always feel alone with that struggle, whether that's ADHD or obsessive compulsive or an eating disorder, like just, general anxiety. Like you kind of always feel like I'm the only person who's living this reality. And in a way you are, but there's other people that are struggling with it too. And then when you can find how they've unlocked it, it can give you hope and hopefully maybe even a framework that you can utilize for your own stuff. And that's what we're doing now with real estate, right? Is like, we've unlocked this thing and we're like, hey, this is really easy. Like not easy is the wrong word. It's simple. It's accessible. And so, okay, let's get this framework out to people so that they can understand it and start inserting themselves into it.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. I think sorry, it would be my kind of last question. You can have events, but like, it's what kind of guardrails did you have, like, to put? You obviously had to have some type of, system in place to be able to keep yourself focused, right? I mean, what kind of guardrails do you have to put up to manage all of these different, elements of your life, right? I mean, I don't know that I can necessarily relate on that end, but I just have a lot of moving pieces in my life, period, because I'm a dad and I'm a husband and, we've got multiple businesses and all this kind of stuff. So like, I need help in that way, regardless of whether or not I have ADHD, because surely you have to have something where you can kind of put these things in silos where, okay, no, this goes into this slot, this goes into this slot. I need some guardrails here to help kind of keep me on track. Like what have you guys implemented? What have you come up with?
For me, a lot of it is habit formation and routines and scheduling. So I need to be very rigid and regimented with my schedule. And this isn't for everybody, but for me, if I can get really granular and time block my day and say from 8 o'clock till 9 o'clock, I'm doing this, 9 to 10, I'm doing this, from 9:30 till 10:30. Like if I do that, by creating that constraint, I'm actually giving myself the ability to exercise maximum freedom within that constraint, because now I can focus. Now I know where I'm supposed to be. And over time, if you do that consistently enough, your body becomes hardwired and programmed to just say, okay, now it's that time of the day. This is when I do this thing. And so I have like very set morning routines, very set evening routines in a lot of ways that makes me very rigid and not very good at like adapting and pivoting in the moment. But what it allows me to do then is get more done in the day because I know where I'm supposed to be. And I just have to go to that next place and do that next thing while I'm like allotted that period of time. I've tried it in the past where I have more of an open free schedule and I just have a list of things that need to get done in the day. And then it would always happen that I get to the end of the day and none of the things were getting done. They would all get kind of moved a little bit forward, but they never got pushed all the way forward. And so I try to scale back and say, okay, the number of things I can realistically get done in a day is always far less than what I think I'm capable of doing. Like I'll start the day and be like, I can do these 10 things, no problem. No, I can maybe do 3. So I just need to like focus and say, what are those 3 things? And then create that time and guard it. And then leaving myself a lot of space in between those times to get distracted. Like being like saying, okay, I'm going to work really hard from this time to this time. And then I'm just going to, for the next 2 hours, I'm just going to space and do whatever and let my mind go. And as I've gotten better and older and like more in tune with my rhythms, I don't need that spacing out time nearly as much as I did when I was younger, but it was a helpful thing to know, okay, I just got to do this for an hour and then I can go on to the next thing. Or, if an hour is too long, block it down even shorter. Say, I just need to do this for 20 minutes. Like every book that I've ever written, I've written in 20-minute chunks, right? I used a Pomodoro technique where I just sit down and say, I'm going to write for 20 minutes today. That's all I got to get done. Like you can do anything for 10 minutes or not 10 minutes, 20 minutes. Well, actually you can do anything for 10 minutes. And then if you get to the end of that 10 minutes, you can say, I can do anything for 10 minutes more. And then you get there. So it's just like bringing it down, making it consumable at wherever you're at to make it palatable so that you're making progress.
Yeah, and I got more books. So 2 more books that are awesome resources is obviously The One Thing, Gary Keller. It's a must read for anybody that wants to, get things done. And also a really quick read, but it's like super dense is Eat That Frog.
Yeah.
That book is like, it's really awesome. Just like it's only like 100 pages long, but every page is like, golden tips to just, be more productive without a whole lot of fluff and whatever in the book pages. So those are 2 that really helped me.
There's another one too called Get Things Done, which is pretty extreme in terms of like the systems that he recommends, which is literally mind dump everything out of your brain. You create a second brain, a physical second brain of files and systems. And that was always a little bit too much for me, but I found a lot of benefit in the mind dumping process where whenever I have something that I need to get done or it hits my brain, I immediately write it down. So I have journals everywhere, I have pieces of paper everywhere, and I just immediately write it down. And I might lose that piece of paper later, but it's out of my brain. And what that does is it closes that cognitive loop. And I think for all of us, regardless if you have ADHD or not, we get stuck when we have too many open loops. And you're not making any progress because, I have to get groceries, I have to make that phone call, I have to do this thing. And the more things that you're holding in your brain, the less likely you are to be able to manage it all. So you got to get it out and you got to create a system of some sort, whether that's digital or physical, like get it out of your brain, get it written down somewhere.
Yep. And then more importantly, the discipline to do it. Cause anybody can download a Trello or a Monday or a Asana, but in that moment of that thing, that task hitting you, having the discipline to go and put it in Asana, put it in Trello, put it in Monday that's where, the rubber hits the road. You can't just download an app and all of a sudden now all your anxieties of all the 100 things you got to get done are solved. You actually have to put in the work. And that's where I see a lot. And we have this conversation internally with our group as well. If like we got to have the discipline to go, we talk to an investor, boom, put it in an active campaign. Like that's the loop that needs to happen. But yeah, that is what I have sticky notes everywhere. That's why I was kind of laughing. But then at the end of the day, I have the discipline to go kind of filter them, compile them, put the important ones in Asana. So it gets done and gets scheduled and, I have accountability of it. So
and Vince, you've hit it on the nail on the head, like the nail on the head there, because like regardless of who you are, like you're coming into this, probably listening to this and thinking, oh yeah, this sounds great. I can do this. You're coming at it from a position of motivation, and the motivation is not going to be there all the time. And so discipline beats motivation in the end. And there's no easy way of like implementing any of these systems beyond just being disciplined in doing it. And so discipline's a muscle that you develop over time. You have to start now and start easy. Like, it doesn't have to be the really hard stuff. Just like, if that's investor communications, it could just be as simple as, hey, as soon as I get off this phone, I go into Active Campaign and I just write his name in. I don't even write down the notes. I just write his name down and just start there. Like, the small act of building discipline will serve you a lifetime. And
just build on to that 1% a day type philosophy, where you don't have to do sweeping lifestyle changes overnight. Just 1% a day. And then that, next quarter, the next 90 days, you do a Q1 review, since we're in January, and you're like, holy crap, I got a lot done. And, got this whole system kind of built out. Awesome stuff. I think we're supposed to be talking about real estate. Let's switch gears. And
I love that though, because I appreciate that. Like, I mean, I think that's like hugely overlooked. And I love that you've taken what's a perceived weakness, right? Like, just like how you said, and it's like, no, it's a strength. It is a dual-edged sword, but you turned it into this strength where it's like, no, like, hey, you know what? If I have this wonderful, like, you know what, I'm going to acknowledge that, and I'm actually going to look to see how can I actually benefit from this. And, at this point, you've obviously moved beyond finding obviously solutions for yourself, but in the things that you're doing, you're also providing solutions for others. I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And this, guys, if you're listening to this at home and you're like, I don't really see the intersection of what they're talking about in real estate. I came to learn about real estate. Well, real estate's easy to learn. There's a ton of information out there. It's tactical. Once you get it into your brain, that's one thing, but applying that education consistently, that's where the rubber meets the road. Like Vince is saying, like, that's the game. And so what we're talking about right now is how do you actually apply that learning in a meaningful way and make, progress in your career or in your business. And so that's all of it. That you hear the myth all the time that you make your money when you buy a piece of real estate, and it's not. It's when you actually get in there and you start operating the asset and you start executing. And that's all about the systems and the day-to-day habits that you're executing against.
Absolutely. So speaking of systems and processes, you're saying Invictus Capital, vertically integrated. Let's dive into that of, what systems, what processes you have. What is Invictus Capital? How is it structured? What deals you've done recently, and we can dive into that, those deals once we get there.
Yeah. So Invictus Capital is the company that my partner, Dan Kruger, and I formed in 2019, specifically to start syndicating real estate. And so we are vertically integrated out of the Twin Cities. And what that means for, the audience at home means that we do the property management in-house. We have hired staff that does that so that we're not outsourcing the leasing and the tenant relations and the maintenance and the construction and unit turns. We're not outsourcing that stuff. We're in control of it. And that was a really conscious decision on our part from the very beginning, because I've always had this thesis that whoever's closest to the consumer wins. And in our business, there's a couple of different consumers that we are serving. One is our residents. Another is our investors. And so how are we best serving our residents? Well, for us, it's been, if we're in control of the process, then we can guarantee the highest quality living experience for our residents. And also then for our investors, because we can be assured that the buck stops with us. There is no pointing fingers. There is no saying, oh, the third party management team screwed us over, or they didn't do this thing, or we're waiting on that thing. It's all on us. And we're kind of an organization that focuses a lot on extreme accountability. Like, we like the idea that when the game winning, or like the game winning shot needs to be, made, we want to have the ball. We want to be that guy. And so it just fits really well with our personalities and our culture, but it's not for everybody. Like, it's not right or wrong to be in-house versus third-party management. Both can work really, really well. You just have to know which one works well for your circumstances and your personality. And so a little context then on the deals that we've done. We did our first syndication, Dan and I together, in January 2020. And that was just a bread and butter value add multifamily deal in St. Paul, Minnesota. Had a ton of meat on the bone, but it required a business strategy where we needed to re-tenant the building. We needed to go in there, get all the bad tenants out because it was a rough demographic, and we needed to do some unit turns, not super heavy stuff, just light cosmetics. And then we needed to get new tenants in there. And that was fine until the eviction moratorium hit. And then that became a little bit more difficult to navigate. And like, we still did just fine. It just pushed back the business plan by a month or two. And we're already caught up and back on pace. So it wasn't a big deal. But at the time, we didn't know that. We didn't know if it was going to be the end of the world. We didn't know, what was going to happen. So we started making a slight shift in our strategy going into the fall, which was to say, we want to buy assets now that we don't need to go and re-tenant them or deploy a lot of capital, like CapEx, right? We want to have the position where from day one, it's cash flowing and we're buying it at a good basis and we have the ability to drive rents, but it's not dictated by us necessarily having to do, massive cash burn. If we want to, we can do that, but it doesn't need to be predicated on it. And so that gave us a lot of optionality to say in 2021, if it's a really crappy year like 2021 or 2020 was, then we can just sit on our cash and wait for everything to get better with the market. And then we can start deploying CapEx later to start driving rents really aggressively. But for that to work, you have to have a really good deal, right? Like you have to be going and finding a deal where you're buying it below market average. There's got to be meat on the bone from a rent perspective. And so that's a unicorn deal. Like everybody obviously wants that deal, but how do you get that? That's the question. And so for us, that came down to creating really strong local relationships with other sellers in this market. And so in the Twin Cities, it's probably, same in the markets that you guys look in, where there's probably a handful of people who control the vast majority of the assets in that marketplace. And so if you can have good relationships with those players, then when it comes time for them to exit deals, you're one of the first people that they call, you get the first bite at the apple, and you can get some of the sweetest returns then. So that's what we did. It was going and saying, let's find those guys and create those relationships. And that's how that last deal kind of came about. Now, currently we have another deal that we're doing that's just the logical extension of that relationship as more deals from that seller keep coming out.
Awesome. Yeah, I know we had talked about that a little bit. So how are you finding these sellers?
So typically broker relationships
could be potentially sellers.
Yeah. So that one came to us through a broker relation, right? So that one, it's really interesting. You go to every property tour and sometimes you meet the sellers, sometimes you don't. We have a process where we like to go to every property tour and see if we can make contact in some way with the seller. Not if we're even interested in buying the property, but we want to have those relationships and start talking to them, build rapport and get to know them so that we can understand what's their wants, needs, and desires and see if there's a way that we can fill that need. And so this seller came onto our radar because we had a really good relationship with a broker a number of years ago. This broker actually was one of Dan, my partner's nutrition clients. So Dan, he's a very fit guy. He does nutrition planning, and he was working with the Orthodox Jewish community because with their kosher needs, it's very difficult for them to meet certain nutritionary dietary needs, right? And so he was working with them, became very involved in that community. And it just so happens that they're also very involved in our local community in real estate. And so you just never know which relationships are long-term going to play out, because this was before Dan was ever even in real estate. And it was before this guy, actually the broker, was ever a broker. And so now he's like the third, he does the third most transaction volume in the Twin Cities as a broker in the multifamily space. So now he's a really good guy to know, but we didn't know that back in the day. And so I think the message there for people is just be cool to everybody, invest in the relationships around you, because you never know where it's going to come from. And when I was younger, I always heard, start investing early, right? The earlier you can start investing, the better. And that's true. But I wish somebody had pointed out to me that it wasn't just about investing money. It was also about investing social capital and putting the time and energy into the relationships around me and thinking, okay, is this person going to still be in my life 15 years from now? What can I do to make sure that they are? Because if you can have 15 years of track record with a person, you can move so much faster on any type of deal or any type of relationship. The speed of trust takes a long time to establish.
Stole it out of my mouth.
There. Got it. That's a good book too, right?
Yeah, I was like, I got it. But
yeah. But once you establish it, you could just move so much faster.
Yeah, absolutely. So Speed of Trust, Stephen Covey, it's, spoiler alert. That's where I was going to. But anyway, great book. Get the book, Speed of Trust. No, so you said 3 important things. Well, you said 4, but then we already hit that one. So in that, in all the things you said. So the first one was the importance of going on tours, even if you don't plan on buying that property. That sounds very dumb to a lot of new investors of why would I go waste my Sunday going and walk in this property with this broker if I have no intention of investing in that neighborhood or that asset? Mm-hmm. Or anything like that. It's because you're not just there for the property, you're there for the relationship. You're there to show the broker that you're serious you're there to learn something. You might even pick up, those little things about property, about the neighborhood, about the product you're looking at, just physical stuff. Steve can talk about as well, because he's a licensed home inspector as well. Just putting in the reps of just walking properties, and the skills that you learn of just looking at water heaters, looking at roofs, looking at foundations and stairs, and those things. Just the more you look at them, the more you start picking up this skill set, even if you don't plan on looking at that asset. And then on the other side of it, more importantly, is that network of just showing the brokers that you're serious, that you are looking. Maybe this isn't the right asset, but you're getting that FaceTime with them. You're top of mind on their radar. When they do get something that fits your criteria, you're going to be the top of that Rolodex when they start blasting out to their calls. So that is very, very important. If you're looking into investing, find out who the brokers are, go tour properties, even if you're not ready at that moment.
And here's another thing that's crazy about this is that a lot of times with these multifamily properties, I don't know if it's the same where you guys are, but up here in the Twin Cities, a lot of times they're doing group tours. Mm-hmm. And so you're getting there and there's like 5 other potential buyers. Well, who do you think owns other properties? Those guys. Yeah. And so now you're sitting there talking, don't view them as the competition, go up and start talking to them, build a relationship. So like that deal that we closed in November, the day that we did a property tour, one other guy came along. And I just started talking to him, and he, initially he was just a pilot for Delta, but then by the end he revealed that he also owned 1,000 units in the Twin Cities, and is like, oh yeah, by the way, I have these 2 properties I'm thinking about selling, and now like we're talking with him about possibly buying these, and it doesn't look like those numbers are going to work out, but you just never know who's going to show up. And so don't cold shoulder other people. Just go up and start talking to them, build that relationship too.
Yeah. It's not the same as going to like an open house on a single family and the other 10 people there are like, these are the people that I'm going to get in a bidding war with over this single family house. Cause that's a little bit of what the agent's trying to do, is that scarcity mindset for open houses, but it's not that at all. These could be potential partners, because everybody's looking to reduce their risk basis in a deal. And if you have 100 unit, and I would much rather split that 100 unit with 1 or 2 investors to get my risk basis down and my my cost basis down. So I have capital to do 200 units or 300, 300 unit deals by partnering up. And this again just happened with me on my trip to Michigan as well, where this guy it's very similar to the Delta pilot, right? He's like, I got this lead on a deal. It's 100 unit. I was thinking about taking it down. I was like, well, let's set up a call, after we went and had lunch together. And by the end of the call, he's like, yeah, I'd much rather he's like, I probably could take it down if I stretched my entire, 401k withdrawals and all that stuff. I can probably take down this 100 unit on my own, but I'd much rather just do it with a partner or 2 and then put down, 30%. And then retain my other 60% for more deals, and still get, the best of both worlds. So it's not your competition. It's the team sport, always looking to solve problems, which is also my next point here, which you mentioned when you initially started going to tours to see if you can find maybe the owner will be there. And so you can get some of that insider knowledge of, okay, what's their situation? How can I, help them? That is absolutely what you should be doing as a multifamily investor at all, is you solve people's problems. That should always be the first lens that you're looking through and you're making your decisions, is how can I solve this person's problem? What are they going on? Why are they selling? Are they trying to do a 1031 exchange? Do they have a lot of equity in the deal? What are they going to do with that equity once they get cashed out? Maybe you can get in a seller finance situation. Maybe you can master lease options, whatever it is. You're there to solve their problems. And the sooner you can find out those problems, the sooner you can solve them. And if you have a good team, then you can solve even more problems and faster, because you have, synergistic effects of 1 + 1 = 3. When you and that Delta pilot team up and, take down this, 200 unit deal, because of these relationships you built. So it's very awesome to see how these things fall into place sometimes. And it's just hard to explain, but then it's like, it happens and you're like, holy crap, how did this, deal fall together? But it's pretty awesome. And then, obviously if you haven't read the networking piece, how important that is, it kind of leads into the problem solving is we very much prescribe to the go-giver type mentality. So if you haven't read The Go-Giver by Bob Burg, absolutely. It's a series of books. It's a must, and it's you go and solve put other people's needs in front of yours first. The more you do that, the more you'll be compensated for whatever your time and your effort. So always give first and not go there trying to see what's in it for you first. So absolutely awesome book, awesome resource on the Go-Giver and the five, what does he call it? The five laws of stratospheric success, I believe is what it is. That's it. And so absolutely quick read. You can get on Audible too. So on the, let me see here. You did let's get a little bit granular on that syndication you did on 2020 or the second one you did. Just quick on the numbers. How did you structure it? What were like the splits and things like that? Did you do a pref? Like how did you structure it? Or better yet, maybe we can do how you structured the first one in January and then how you structured the second one at the end of 2020 because of COVID. How did COVID affect your underwriting and your deal structure going from your first deal pre-COVID and your second deal post-COVID? And kudos for you for keep driving and getting a deal done during COVID, because we had a lot of our friends and colleagues pump the brakes and we didn't, and we kept driving forward. And like, there's still good deals out there where we have sound fundamentals on our underwriting. And we ended up closing 4 deals in 2020 through COVID. So
nice.
But we want to hear yours.
Yeah, you gotta stay active in the market, right? Like everybody gets really scared or during COVID, is rightfully so, like not really sure if the world's going to end or not. But one thing's for certain, that if you're not in the game, you're not going to win. So you got to at least be in there taking shots and figuring out what's the best way to still make money, right? So maybe the plan that you had before COVID, the business model, no longer applies. So put that aside, and then maybe the market will come back around, and then it'll be time to pull that playbook back out. But while COVID is happening, the people that were succeeding are the ones that saying, okay, given this new market environment, how are we going to succeed? What does this now mean for us, and how can we move forward? And so that deal that we closed at the beginning of 2020 was a 32 unit that we purchased at $75,000 per door, which in that area, the comparables were transacting at closer to $110 per door. So already there was a ton of meat on the bone. We had to put about $5,000 in unit renovations in. But again, the big value add for this property was the tenants, getting them out, getting new tenants in. This building was the worst building on the block in a really nice B area, just a terrible tenant base. So if we could get that turned, then we were going to be able to realize all of that value. On that one, I think what was the structure? That was 80-20 with a 7% pref. And so that was the very first syndication we ever did. And we wanted to make sure that we were structuring it very favorably in terms of the equity split towards our investors, because we're not interested in maximizing our returns on any one transaction. We try to play long-term games with long-term people and say, okay, we want to deliver such exceptional returns to these investors that they're going to keep coming back time and time again for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And so recognizing that we just started our syndication journey, we wanted to make sure that was structured favorable to them. So then the second deal that we did in 2020 was 30 units. And those were at $125 per door in an area that was transacting at closer to $150 per door. So again, a lot of meat on the bone, just a different asset class in a much, much nicer area. So we made a shift towards the trendy neighborhood, the neighborhood that's like always in super high demand in St. Paul. And we went towards an asset class that was I would say a slight flight towards quality, which is a high B asset. And the real value there was, again, this guy, he owned these properties for over 30 years. This property was one of the first ones he ever purchased. So he had a ton of equity in it, and he's getting older. He'd been prioritizing just getting tenants in there that weren't going to move and they weren't going to create a headache. And so he got really great tenants in there and kept them on average for like over 5 years. And so this over time, the gap between what they were charging for rent and what market was just started growing. But the units were still in really great shape. The buildings were fantastic. It was just, a really easy deal to walk into. And if we want to, we can do the unit renovations, We have it currently budgeted at 5,000 per unit, but it's unclear if we're even going to need to deploy that in the next year or so, because the tenants are solid. We've had conversations with them about the fact that their rent is going to be increasing, and across the board, they're all like, yeah, we saw that coming. We've known that we're getting a really sweet deal in this area for a long time. So our goal is to minimize the amount of transition and, try to decrease the vacancy. So we want to keep those tenants, because unit turn costs, those are one of the biggest expenses for an operator. If we can eliminate that by just doing a slight bump in rent and keeping that tenant and not having to incur the expenses, that's much better in the long term, because it's less traumatic overall for the tenant, for us and our team. And so that's our current plan. With that deal, we structured that one as a 75-25 split with a 6% pref towards our LPs. And so again, like, it's still a really favorable split in terms of like what the LPs are getting, but we just saw that there was more meat on this bone. And so that we could, make that split a little bit more equitable between the GPs and LPs.
Very hilarious, because our first deal was 80-20. For that
nice.
exact same reason. And our second deal was 75-25.
Boom.
Exact same reason. So it's kind of funny how, you evolve and we go through that same thought process, because it was exactly the same thought process. But we were not transaction at 125 a door. So that is kudos for you to going toward the nicer stuff. We are very much set. Our niche is definitely that C class value add, that deep value add. We're going in there and, a lot of cleaning house, a lot of CapEx. But that's where we're at right now. And,
we love that too. Like, we want to get to that place, but right now, just given the market cycle and what we see on the horizon, we just want to make sure that we get back to a place where we can reasonably manage tenants and get them out, get them in if we want to, if we need to. And so we want to get back to that's where the returns are the best.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The that flight to quality is definitely there. We are looking as well. We just haven't found any in the last few deals that kind of fit that B class, that B plus, that light value play. So we're looking though. That's awesome. You found one deal that fits that mold, and it sounds like it's going to be a great investment for you and your investors. But I am done. Steve, you're up.
Yeah, no, so we want to, we definitely want to make sure we're valuing your time. So as we kind of wrap up here, we'll jump into our fire round, and we'll just
throw them at me.
A few questions, and then I know you kind of already beat us to the punch with one of the superpowers earlier, but that's all right. We'll still have you share briefly now. All right. So first question up. What is the best book that you recommend other than Rich Dad Poor Dad? Because we know that's a big favorite of a lot of people. So.
It's funny. I've never actually recommended Rich Dad Poor Dad. I think I recommended it maybe to my sister once, but generally I don't, because by the time I'm having the conversation about real estate with a lot of people, they've already read it. And so it's like, what's the next thing? For me, it's all about mindset. It's all about starting with the mind. And so the book that I recommend the most of any book ever is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. It's Stoic philosophy, just really understing, the insights of an emperor. Yeah, he's got it. Yeah.
Daily Stoic right here.
Show it off.
Yep. If mindset is the windshield through which you see the world, you got to get it clear. You got to get it, crystal clear, because you're not going to be able to get to where you're going until you can see it. And, for me, that's the book that resonates the most, and I find the most value in it.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I'll definitely have to check that one out. Second one was what is your superpower? And
we already talked about the hyper focus, and so I won't cop out and say that one. And I kind of already talked about the storytelling. So maybe that's also a cop out, but I do think those are kind of the only two strengths I have, honestly.
What are your
that's too reductionist.
You said you're a professional athlete, right? So what sports? I think you mentioned rock climbing.
Rock climbing and snowboarding. And so, actually probably my greatest strength of anything is that I'm really good at learning. I understand how I learn best. And then I'm also really disciplined at putting in the time and energy necessary to get good at a thing. And I think for me, learning it's our gift, right? As humans, right? Like I've been talking about this a lot recently, is that, a baby horse, it comes out and then 10 minutes later it's running around doing all the things that a horse does because it's pre-programmed like that. But a human, it comes out and then 20 years later, it's maybe functional, sort of. It can go out on its own into the world. But what our legacy is one of learning and growing. And so we can learn anything. We can learn neuropsychology. We can learn how to send a man to the moon, or you could learn how to flip a burger. Like, it's your choice to learn, like, what you choose to learn. But knowing how you learn is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself, is figure that out. Because everybody's different. You know, like, you might be an auditory learner, you might be a visual learner, you might be kinesthetic. Like, figure it out for yourself, because it's going to pay the biggest dividends in your life if you can unlock that one thing.
That's awesome. That may actually
also
kind of answer this next.
I was saying, I was also a sponsored snowboarder, so
nice.
We may be like the same person.
And we might be, except for you went out to Hawaii and I stayed in the cold. So I don't know. Like, I'm making weird life choices.
I am moving back to Michigan. So.
You have a kindred spirit there.
Yeah.
All right. So that kind of answers some of the next question was, what's the biggest lesson you've learned over your career?
You know, it kind of ties back to what I was saying about investing earlier in the people around you. Honestly, I've been one of my biggest weaknesses is I'm very self-focused. I'm very inward focused. I can entertain myself for days on an end. I can sit and write myself a book. I don't need another human. I can just tell myself a story. And that's both a good thing and a bad thing, in the sense that in real estate and business, you can't build anything without other people. You can't do it alone. And so I wish I had taken that more seriously when I was younger and spent the time and energy to build those relationships around me in a meaningful way.
So as we kind of wrap up here, what's, this will be kind of our last question here. So with a busy working professional who's working towards actual financial freedom, what advice do you have for them?
You know, everybody says educate yourself. That's step one. And then, you got to go and take action. So that's step two. And it's really just that. Like, I don't want to make it oversimplified, but you just need to keep educating yourself, keep learning, and keep applying. And if it's not working, change what you're doing. Go learn something else, apply that, but change how you're applying it. And that's the secret to success. It's just doing that on a long enough time frame. But I think a lot of people, especially if you're just getting into real estate, it's probably feeling a little scary and a little overwhelming because there's just so much. So try and reduce it down, make it simpler for yourself, and just, pick a niche. Say, I'm going to look at multifamily. I'm going to look in this area, and just start getting more and more granular, because I think a lot of people, they just get overwhelmed by the fire hose of possibility. There's just so many different ways to make money in real estate. You can fix and flip, hold, you can do storage, you can do mobile homes. Yeah, they're all great, but just pick one and apply, consistent force over a long enough time, and trust that it's not going to happen quickly. Real estate is the best way to get rich slowly, but it's the sure thing. If you do it long enough, you will get rich, but it's just not going to happen probably as fast as you want. And so make sure that your expectations and reality are in alignment, and then you'll be happy.
So I got one thing, and it's actually, I'm going to throw it over to Steve. Steve, a couple of weeks ago, you told us that story about building a bowl or something like that. And I think that was the best analogy that I've ever heard. You remember that story about?
Yeah. You're talking about, two classes were tasked with the same assignment. Was, to build a bowl. Well, one group would say, okay, hey, you know what? You're going to be graded based off of how many bowls you're able to produce. And the other group is, no, you're going to be based off of the quality of the bowl that you produce. But what they found out was the one that was focused on quality actually took forever, and the quality was quite poor, versus the one who was focused on reps and just pumping out the greatest amount of volume. They actually turned out with the best quality product. Mm-hmm.
Because they're putting so many reps in that every version of that bowl they did, every action they took, they tweaked it a little bit to get them, realigned in the right direction and further. So I thought that was a great analogy to you're not to get past the analysis paralysis. It has to be perfect. I need to have my entire 10-year plan laid out, 10 years, and then 5 years and 3 years and 1 year and quarterly and weekly and daily, goals before I do anything. Well, if you do that, you're never going to get started. So it's throw the stick, right? Pick up the stick, throw it out in the field, and then just walk to it. And then you'll have your left and right bumpers. You'll, make some mistakes, and you readjust, and you pump out another rep, and you just keep doing it and keep doing it. And then 1 year goes by, 2 years go by, and 3 years go by. And you're like, holy crap, I'm not even the same person. I've completely evolved into a new, I shed my skin, I've molted, and I've came out to an entirely new being because I've been consistent action and things like that. So Great analogy. I love that.
That reminds me of from the book Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's book. A mediocre mind applied with enough diligence can't help but to become exceptional. Like, you don't have to, like, we're not exceptional. I don't think none of us three are like super exceptional in any way. Like, we're just probably an average human who's, just figured out how to get good at a particular thing. And so that can give you a lot of hope at home because you're probably average too.
Absolutely.
Exceptionally average.
Exceptionally average. Yeah.
Yeah. Consistent action, right?
Yep.
All right. Awesome. Well, how can it's been awesome having you on the show. For those of our audience that actually want to learn more about you, get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, find us at invictusmultifamily.com. Right now, we have a bunch of free resources over there for people that are interested in learning more about passive investing and just understanding the nuances of how to vet a sponsor, how to find a deal, how to find a market, and then what it actually looks like to fund a deal, because it's a little bit of a black box. It's a little scary. And we just want to reduce a little bit of that anxiety. And the step one is just becoming a little bit more educated on it. So there's a couple free resources over there right now at Invictus Multifamily. Go check it out. And then we also do a podcast called Multifamily Investing Made Simple. And it's exactly what it sounds like. We're just trying to take the complexity out of this so everybody can see just how accessible it is for them.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show, Anthony, with us. You guys definitely go and check out the resources that he mentioned. We'll make sure we put them in the show notes as well. But yeah, we look forward to having you back on at some point. Would love to, to see what kind of new projects you guys have going on. So we'll have to have you back on sometime in the future.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
What an awesome show with Anthony Vicino today with Invictus Capital. He just had so many great nuggets to share with us. A lot to do with taking what could be perceived as a weakness. It's a diagnosed with ADHD pretty early on, and turn it into something that actually became a strength for him, and turning it into something what he calls hyperfocus. So that's huge. Obviously, boiling things down to keeping it simple. Not overcomplicating things. Just turning, learning something new and being able to just go out and take some action, apply it, and being consistent. That was something he shared with us, and obviously he's done a number of different things in his career, and his businesses. So just being able to be disciplined with that, to kind of chunk down, make things a little bit simple, but making sure that he's progressing forward, was definitely great. Had a number of good book recommendations for us as well. Definitely go back, take a look, take another listen through the episode. I'm sure you'll get as many nuggets as I have. I know I've got notes written down here as well. So. But yeah, definitely great having Anthony on the show. And if you guys are interested in connecting with us, go to tricityequity.com to learn a little bit more about the things that we've got going on, and how you can better connect with us. To connect with other like-minded investors, make sure that you're going on to Facebook. We have a Facebook group called Honolulu Multifamily and More, where you can definitely connect with local investors here if you're in the Honolulu market, or nationwide. We obviously have different projects going on across the nation. So make sure you go on the group. Drop us a request to join the group, and we're glad to connect you with other investors and with us ourselves. If you found value in today's podcast and today's recording, please subscribe. Make sure you're hopping on, giving us a review. Check it out on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever that you listen to podcasts. You can find us. If you know anybody else who might resonate with today's episode, with the show in general, make sure that you're recommending this to your friends and other professional contacts. Please share the episode with them. But it's great having you guys on. All the listeners, go out, take some action, seize the day. We'll see you next time. Aloha.